The galaxy did not hear the scream when it happened. No alarm rang. No council chamber fell silent. 14 million human lives ended in less than 6 minutes, and the stars barely noticed. That was the mistake. Humanity had spent generations believing that survival meant obedience. When they first reached the wider galaxy, they learned very quickly where they stood. The Galactic Authority was old, older than most recorded histories. It was powerful, organized, and absolutely convinced of its own superiority. Worlds lived or died based on numbers, votes, and laws written in languages humans could barely pronounce. Earth had been labeled a death world almost immediately. Too much gravity, unstable climate, predators that hunted for sport, microbes that killed silently. And yet, humans had survived all of it. That alone made the Authority uneasy. So humanity was allowed into the galaxy, but only barely. Limited colonies, restricted travel, no heavy weapons, no military fleets. Humans were tolerated the way one tolerated a dangerous animal kept behind thick glass. For 70 years, humanity complied. They built. They traded. They learned alien languages. They smiled while being spoken down to. And quietly, they remembered. The colony of Havenfall orbited a pale blue star at the edge of regulated space. It was not large or wealthy, but it was alive. Cities glowed softly along its continents. Children ran beneath artificial skies. Farmers worked soil imported grain by grain from Earth. It was a symbol of what humans did best, taking hostile places and making them home. On the morning Havenfall died, Governor Elias Rourke was drinking reheated coffee and reviewing agricultural reports. The warning never came. Authority warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Automated. Silent. Efficient. They did not hail the planet. They did not wait for evacuation. Orbital cannons activated and fired with mechanical precision. Atmosphere boiled. Cities vanished. Oceans flashed into steam. 6 minutes later, Havenfall was a dead rock. The official reason arrived 12 hours later. Population quota violation, 0.2% over limit. Corrective action authorized. That message reached human space faster than the screams ever could. Captain Mara Vance was aboard the civilian research vessel Wayfarer, charting unstable jump corridors, when the data burst hit the bridge. She watched the holographic projection replay the destruction frame by frame, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth hurt. Around her, the crew said nothing. No one cried. No one shouted. Silence spread, the dangerous kind. On Earth, people stopped in the streets when the news broke. Some looked up at the sky. Others sat down wherever they stood. A few laughed, sharp and broken, because the alternative was worse. Human leadership convened within hours. The Unified Human Council had always been a slow thing. Compromise was its nature. Debate its weapon. But this meeting lasted less than 9 minutes. When the final vote was called, there were no dissenters. Humanity would no longer obey. Far beneath the rust-red surface of Mars, Admiral Jonah Cade stood alone in a chamber that officially did not exist. His hair had gone grey in service to a navy forbidden to fight. His hands bore scars from training accidents that had been quietly erased from records. A terminal flickered to life before him. Authorization code accepted. Redacted programs unlocked. Admiral Cade exhaled slowly. For decades, humans had prepared, not for conquest, but for survival. Civilian ships were designed with reinforced hulls for safety. Mining lasers were tuned just a little too precisely. Engines were tested far beyond legal limits under the excuse of environmental stress research. Every rule had been followed. Technically, across hidden shipyards carved into asteroids and hollowed moons, systems woke from dormancy. Hull plating shifted. Power cores rerouted. Weapon arrays unfolded like restrained fists finally unclenching. Humans had not built a fleet. They had built endurance. Lieutenant Rhea Solis felt the difference the moment the gravity increased. The training facility on Luna adjusted its pull without warning, pressing down until every movement felt heavy, punishing. She gritted her teeth and kept moving. Around her, recruits staggered, adapted, and then adapted again. Humans trained where most species would collapse. They learned to fight while exhausted, injured, and afraid, because that was how they had always lived. In the wider galaxy, the instructor said calmly, this gravity would be illegal. Rhea smiled through sweat. Good. The authority noticed the changes, of course. Increased ship movement. Spikes in industrial output. Diplomatic silence. But they had seen this before. Other species had protested. Some had rebelled. All had failed. High Executive Vila Thane, overseeing frontier security, reviewed the reports with mild irritation. Humans are emotional, he said to his advisors. They will rage, then negotiate. They always do. He dismissed the alerts and moved on to trade disputes. That night, the stars shifted. Human fleets emerged across 15 authority-controlled systems simultaneously. Not in tight formations. Not according to known doctrines. They appeared scattered, chaotic, almost reckless. Then they accelerated. Authority sensors screamed warnings as human ships pulled maneuvers that violated every known safety margin. G-forces spiked into lethal ranges. And the humans did not slow down. Captain Mara Vance stood on the bridge of the Wayfarer, now something very different, as space twisted around them. Her vision tunneled. Her body strained against restraints designed for survival on a Deathworld. Hold course, she said evenly. The first Authority defense platform exploded before it could fully power its shields. Across the galaxy, oppressed species watched in disbelief as the impossible unfolded. The Authority, ancient, absolute, was bleeding. And humanity was just getting started. Somewhere in the void, Admiral Jonah Cade watched the tactical display light up with confirmed strikes. He did not smile. He did not cheer. He simply said the words that would echo through history. Let the galaxy learn, he murmured, what it means to threaten a species that evolved by refusing to die. The Galactic Authority had always believed fear was a tool only they could use. For 12,000 years, fear had kept systems quiet. It kept worlds obedient. It kept rebellions small and short-lived. The Authority appeared, overwhelming and precise, and resistance ended before it truly began. That belief shattered in less than one standard day. Across Authority space, emergency signals flooded communication relays. Defense platforms went dark. Patrol fleets vanished mid-transmission. Long-trusted sensor arrays returned data that made no sense, human ships accelerating beyond survivable limits, weaving through kill zones as if the laws of physics were optional suggestions. Commander Iris Tal, a tactical analyst stationed at the stronghold of Korth Reach, stared at the battle projections with growing unease. He had studied dozens of species, dozens of wars. He knew how panic looked. This was different. These vessels should be crippled, he said quietly. Their crews should be dead. The officer beside him swallowed. They are not slowing. Human ships did not advance like conquerors. They did not form clean lines or announce demands. They struck like storms, unpredictable, violent, and everywhere at once. Supply depots vanished in silent flashes. Command hubs lost power before alarms could spread. And wherever Authority forces attempted to regroup, humans were already there. Captain Mara Vance felt every impact rattle through her bones as the Wayfarer tore through debris fields created by its own weapons. Her crew moved with sharp efficiency, hands steady, voices calm. These were scientists, navigators, engineers, people who had never planned to fight a war. But they had grown up human. Damage reports scrolled past her display. Hull integrity dipped, then stabilized. Life support held. A lesser-built ship would have torn itself apart under the strain. Target neutralized, her weapons officer said, disbelief leaking into his voice. Then we move, Mara replied. No pause. She knew the truth they all felt but did not say aloud. Pausing meant thinking. Thinking meant remembering Havenfall. On the ground, the war looked very different. Planetary garrisons had never prepared for humans up close. On the industrial moon of Selkaris, Authority soldiers took defensive positions as boarding craft slammed into docking rings. Hulls ruptured. Air screamed into space. Then the humans came through the breach. They were smaller than many Authority species. Lighter, softer looking, and terrifying. Sergeant Owen Hale led his unit forward without hesitation. The gravity here was a third of Earth's, and every step felt like flying. He moved faster than his body ever could back home, armored boots smashing into the deck with bone-cracking force. An Authority trooper fired. The energy bolt scorched Owen's shoulder, pain flaring white-hot. He didn't stop. He didn't even slow. He closed the distance in seconds, slammed into the alien with enough force to fold reinforced plating, and kept moving. Around him, his squad did the same, absorbing hits, adapting instantly, advancing with relentless pressure. Authority soldiers broke formation. They had never faced enemies who kept coming after being wounded. Never fought beings who treated pain as information instead of a stopping point. Owen barely registered the bodies behind him. His thoughts were simple. Clear. Forward. Protect the team. Finish the mission. Back in Authority command space, High Executive Vila Thane finally felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Uncertainty. Reports contradicted each other. Human casualties were far lower than projections. Captured footage showed humans continuing to fight after injuries that would incapacitate most species instantly. They do not behave rationally, one advisor said. Thane's mandibles tightened. They are predators from a Deathworld. This was known. No, the advisor replied softly. This was underestimated. Across the galaxy, something unexpected happened. Worlds long crushed under Authority rule began to listen. The Kashari, whose atmosphere processors had been seized generations ago, intercepted human transmissions. Not threats, but signals of movement, of defiance. The Ulran, whose cities had been dismantled for resource quotas, watched Authority fleets retreat for the first time in living memory. Whispers spread through hidden channels. The Authority could bleed. The humans were not afraid. Maybe, neither should they be. Admiral Jonah Cade monitored it all from Mars, eyes tired but sharp. This phase of the war was never meant to be decisive. It was meant to send a message. Humans were not pleading. Humans were not negotiating. Humans were hunting targets they had studied for decades. Phase 1 is complete, an aide said quietly. Cade nodded. Then Phase 2 begins. Deep within human-controlled space, gates long considered inactive powered up. Experimental systems came online, communication methods the Authority had never detected. Human ingenuity had found ways to move information, not ships, faster than anyone thought possible. Across the galaxy, oppressed species received a single message, translated into hundreds of languages. You are not alone. You were never weak. If you choose to stand, we will stand with you. Captain Mara Vance read the confirmation pings as Allied signals began lighting up her display. Not fleets, not yet, but eyes, ears, safe harbors. Hope, cautiously waking. On Selkaris, Sergeant Owen Hale finally paused, breathing hard amid the wreckage. His armor was scorched. Blood ran down his side. His squad regrouped, battered but standing. You good? Someone asked. Owen nodded once. Still breathing. He thought of Havenfall, of people he had never met, but somehow knew. He tightened his grip on his weapon. Let's keep it that way, he said. Far away, High Executive Thane stared out at the stars as another report arrived, another lost stronghold, another failed counterattack. For the first time, he understood. The galaxy had not provoked a rebellion. It had awakened persistence. And persistence, once unleashed, did not stop. The Galactic Authority had prepared for rebellion with guns, fleets, and punishment. They had never prepared for creativity. As human attacks continued, Authority analysts struggled to understand why their countermeasures failed. Defensive doctrines that had crushed hundreds of species collapsed against enemies who refused to behave predictably. Human ships did not retreat when outgunned. They did not hold territory in neat, controllable patterns. They struck, vanished, reappeared somewhere else, and struck again. To the Authority, war was control. To humans, war was adaptation. Dr. Lena Morodo had never fired a weapon in her life. She was a systems architect, a quiet woman with a habit of humming while thinking. Before the war, she had designed traffic routing algorithms for orbital stations. Now she stood in a hidden command center beneath Earth's oceans, staring at a living map of the galaxy. "What if we stop trying to fight their fleets?" she asked softly. Around her, military officers turned. Admiral Jonah Cade raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "They depend on centralized authority," Lena continued. "Their logistics, communications, energy grids, everything flows through rigid hierarchies. That's efficient. It's also fragile." She began highlighting nodes across the map. Not military bases. Not fleets. Relays. Bureaucratic hubs. Resource authorization cores. "We don't need to beat them everywhere," she said. "We just need to make them doubt everything." Within days, human cyber units launched something the Authority had never classified as a threat. Stories. Human transmissions flooded civilian networks, unofficial, unsanctioned, impossible to fully block. They carried footage of Authority defeats, recordings of human voices speaking calmly under fire, data proving decades of exploitation and genocide. But more than that, they carried something alien to Authority space. Choice. On the mineral world of Krithis, Administrator Charles Wren watched a forbidden broadcast in a darkened office. The screen showed a human ship limping away from battle, hull torn open, crew visibly injured. They were laughing. Not hysterically. Not in madness. Laughing because they were alive. Charles felt something twist inside his chest. Authority doctrine said resistance led only to suffering. Yet here were humans, bleeding, outnumbered, and still advancing. The broadcast ended with a simple message. Survival is not permission. It is defiance. Charles shut the screen off, hands shaking. Across Authority territory, similar moments unfolded. Workers slowed production. Garrison commanders hesitated before firing. Information spread faster than fear ever had. The Authority responded the only way it knew how. It escalated. High Executive Vila Thane authorized the use of planetary suppression fleets, weapons designed to end resistance by annihilating entire biospheres. The order moved through layers of command, slower now, delayed by confusion, rerouted by human interference. Captain Mara Vance received the alert mid-jump. "They're going after civilian worlds," her navigator said. Mara's jaw tightened. "Whose?" "All of them. Human. Non-human. Anyone suspected of sympathy." The Authority believed terror would restore control. Instead, it unified the galaxy. On the ocean world of Nerith, the aquatic Thalion watched Authority ships descend toward their cities. For generations, they had hidden, endured, and survived quietly beneath poisoned seas. This time, they did not flee. Human engineers had helped them reinforce their pressure domes. Human scientists had shared water purification techniques banned by the Authority. And human soldiers, trained in crushing gravity, now fought underwater beside them, moving with terrifying strength. When Authority landing craft breached the waves, they were met by something they had never faced before. Resistance that had learned from humans. Sergeant Owen Hale fought differently now. He no longer charged blindly. He coordinated with alien allies whose senses exceeded human limits. He adapted his tactics, shared techniques, listened. Humanity's greatest strength was no longer endurance alone. It was cooperation. On the battlefield, Authority forces faltered. Their troops were trained to obey orders, not improvise. When plans failed, they froze. Humans never froze. They rerouted power through wreckage, turned debris into cover, used broken systems as weapons. If something failed, they tried something else. And then something else again. Losses mounted on both sides, but only one side learned from every mistake. In Authority space, cracks became fractures. Several regional governors openly refused orders. Fleets failed to mobilize. Entire systems went silent, not destroyed, but withdrawn. High Executor Thane slammed his claws into the command table. "They were supposed to fear us," he hissed. "They do," an aide said carefully. "But they fear extinction more." Thane stared at the star map. Human influence spread not like an empire, but like a network, messy, overlapping, impossible to fully erase. For the first time, the Authority faced a truth it could not classify. Humans were not fighting to rule the galaxy. They were fighting to make sure no one ever ruled it like this again. Admiral Jonah Cade received the latest reports quietly. Losses. Victories. Uprisings sparked by human presence. "Are we winning?" an officer asked. Cade considered the question. "We're changing the rules," he said finally. "That matters more." Far from command centers and battle maps, Captain Mara Vance stood alone on her bridge, watching distant stars flicker as systems chose defiance over obedience. She thought of Havenfall, of the millions who never got to see this moment. "We remember you," she whispered. The galaxy was no longer asleep. And it would never be simple again. Victory was never going to be clean. As the galaxy shifted, as worlds rose and Authority power fractured, the price of defiance became painfully clear. Human forces were winning battles, but war was no longer a series of strikes. It had become a living thing, spreading, changing, consuming everything it touched. Captain Mara Vance learned this when the distress call arrived from Elio's station. Elio's was not a military target. It was a refugee hub, millions of displaced beings from dozens of species, living in fragile habitats stitched together by hope and necessity. Humans had helped build it, protected it quietly. The Authority fleet arrived anyway. Mara watched the sensor feed as enemy ships took formation around the station. They did not fire immediately. They waited. "They want witnesses," her tactical officer said. Mara felt her hands tremble. She forced them still. "All ships, maximum burn. We don't arrive late." Human vessels tore through space, engines screaming in protest. Hulls heated. Systems strained. No one asked if it was safe. Only if it was fast enough. On Elio Station, panic spread as Authority transmitters activated. A single message echoed across all frequencies. "Shelter those who defy us, and you will share their fate." Sergeant Owen Hale was already there. He had been rotating off the front, escorting civilian convoys, when the first warning came. Now he stood at the edge of a docking ring, watching refugees scramble as gravity fluctuated under emergency power. "They're not evacuating," one of his squad mates said. "There's nowhere to go." Owen nodded grimly. He keyed his comm all units, defensive positions. "We hold." They all knew what that meant. Authority shock troops boarded within minutes. Not cautiously. Not tactically. They came to punish. The first explosion ripped through the outer habitat ring. Pressure doors slammed shut just in time, severing entire sections of the station. Thousands died instantly. Owen didn't see it. He felt it, the vibration through his boots, the sudden silence where voices had been. His squad moved without orders. They had learned from humans and aliens alike. They set traps from wreckage, used broken lighting for cover, coordinated with civilians who knew the station better than any invader ever could. Authority soldiers advanced in disciplined lines. They broke. Human-alien teams struck from angles no doctrine covered. Owen took a hit to the leg that shattered armor and bone. He screamed once, then dragged himself behind cover, applied a field brace, and stood back up. Pain was irrelevant. Stopping was not an option. Above them, space erupted. Captain Mara Vance's fleet arrived like a storm. Human ships slammed into Authority vessels with brutal precision, not seeking dominance, seeking disruption. They tore apart command ships, jammed communications, forced chaos. But the Authority had committed fully. More ships poured in. For the first time since the war began, human losses mounted rapidly. Mara watched one of her escorts vanish in a flash of light. 37 crew. Gone. Her throat tightened. "Stay on mission," she ordered, voice steady by sheer force of will. "Protect the station." On Mars, Admiral Jonah Cade received the casualty reports in silence. Each name hit harder than the last. These were not numbers. They were people. Volunteers. Engineers. Medics. Teachers who had learned to fight because there was no one else. "We can pull back," an advisor said carefully. "Regroup." Cade shook his head. "If we do, Helios falls. And with it, everything we've promised." He leaned forward. "Authorize contingency protocol." The room went still. That protocol had been debated for years. Never intended for use. Human ingenuity, weaponized one final way. At Helios Station, Authority commanders suddenly lost sensor clarity. Their targeting systems flickered. Navigation failed. Ships drifted just enough to collide, shields flaring uselessly. Mara stared at her display. "What did we just do?" "Human signal ghosts," her comms officer said in awe. "We flooded their systems with false environmental data. They think space itself is betraying them." Human engineers had exploited something no one else had considered. Authority species relied heavily on automation. Humans trusted people. As AI systems panicked under contradictory inputs, human crews adapted manually. They flew by instinct, experience, and stubborn refusal to surrender control. The Authority fleet fractured. On the station, Owen felt the shift before he saw it. Enemy fire faltered. Coordination broke. "Push," he growled into the comm now. Human and alien defenders surged forward together. When it was over, Helios Station still stood. Barely. The corridors were filled with smoke, blood, and the quiet sobs of survivors. Owen collapsed against a bulkhead, leg useless, vision dimming. A Thalian medic pressed a cooling limb against his forehead. "You stayed," she said softly. Owen smiled weakly. "Yeah. We do that." Across the galaxy, the battle became legend. The Authority had failed to make an example. Instead, humanity had. But the cost was undeniable. Human worlds mourned. Flags lowered. Names carved into stone and memory. The war was no longer abstract. It was personal, painful, and permanent. Captain Mara Vance stood before the names of her lost crew, projected in soft light across the bridge. "We don't stop," she said quietly. "Not now. Not ever." Because if they did, every death meant nothing. And humanity had never accepted that. The end did not come with fire. It came with silence. Across Authority space, command signals failed one by one. Fleets waited for orders that never arrived. Governors stared at sealed channels. Automated systems, once trusted above all else, shut themselves down under conflicting commands and corrupted authority chains. The Galactic Authority had ruled by control. And control had finally slipped beyond its grasp. High Executive Vila Thane stood alone in the council chamber that had once ruled the stars. The great holomap before him was dim, its colors fading as systems declared neutrality or independence. Some openly aligned with humanity. Others simply chose to stand alone for the first time in recorded history. "You were supposed to fear us," Thane whispered. But fear was no longer enough. Human fleets did not advance on the core worlds. They did not bomb the council chamber. They did not execute the remaining leaders. That confused the galaxy more than any victory ever could. Admiral Jonah Cade addressed the galaxy on an open broadcast. No uniforms. No symbols of dominance. Just a tired human face, scarred by time and consequence. "We were called Deathworlders," he said calmly. "Not because we love death, but because we learned to live where death was constant." He paused, letting the words settle. "You taught us obedience. You taught us fear. But you never taught us hopelessness. We already knew how to survive without permission." The message was translated into thousands of languages. "We are not here to replace the Authority," Cade continued. "We are here to end the idea that anyone gets to decide who deserves to exist." Then the transmission ended. And humanity waited. On Helios Station, life slowly returned. Sections were rebuilt. Memorials erected where corridors had once been. Sergeant Owen Hale woke in a medical bay, his leg wrapped in regeneration mesh. The pain was distant now. A Thalian child sat nearby, drawing crude images on a tablet. Humans and aliens together, standing under stars. "You stayed," the child said, looking up at him. Owen nodded. "Yeah." "Will you leave now?" Owen considered the question, then smiled softly. "No. I think I'll help fix things." Across the stars, Captain Mara Vance guided the Wayfarer through peaceful space for the first time since the war began. Her ship bore scars, patched hulls, mismatched panels, but it still flew. Like its crew. She thought of Havenfall, of the millions lost, and of the worlds now free because humanity had refused to stay quiet. Freedom had not come from strength alone. It came from stubborn compassion. On worlds long crushed by authority rule, people made choices for the first time. Some formed councils. Some asked for human guidance. Some asked for nothing at all. Humanity respected all of it. They offered help, not commands. Defense, not domination. Knowledge, not chains. It was messy, slow, imperfect. It was real. Years later, the term Deathworlder meant something new. It no longer described a planet of violence. It described a people who could endure the impossible and still choose mercy. A species that faced extinction and responded not with annihilation, but with unity. A civilization that proved survival was not about crushing others. It was about standing together and refusing to let anyone be erased. In forgotten corners of the galaxy, elders would tell the story differently each time. Some said humans were unstoppable warriors. Others said they were dangerous idealists. Most agreed on one thing. The galaxy would never return to what it was before. Because the day the Deathworlders fought back, the stars did not just ignite with war. They ignited with possibility. And for the first time in 12,000 years, the future belonged to everyone.